So now cash-strapped consumers will have to dig deeper into their pockets as a massive electricity tariff hike of about 12.74% took effect from yesterday. Now, energy regulator NERSA approved the utilities application for an increase last year. Meanwhile, the Mineral Resources and Energy Department says petrol will increase at midnight by 65 cents a litre for 93 unleaded and 67 cents for 95 unleaded. The price of diesel will increase by around 3 cents a litre. Now, to talk to us about this and how to cope with the rising cost of living, we're now joined by debt management strategist Paulvia Shiburi joins us right now. Thank you so much for your time on the program.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a great pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's a tough time for consumers and people have now been forced to tighten their belts. What advice can you give us before we even get into this conversation?
Look, it's not easy. It hasn't been easy for South African economy and also for South African consumers, primarily because of the so many prime interest rate that has gone up in the previous years and inflation also going up. So it has been a very dire situation for consumers who currently are over-indebted, or a lot of people are getting over-indebted simply because there's not enough money to pay for their living expenses and as well maintain their debt obligations.
And during this time, some people are even forced to take on more debt. What would your advice be, especially when people have to navigate this tough maze of avoiding taking on more debt, seeing that the cost of living is simply just rising?
We as a debt counselor always say that you cannot tell people not to take out debt or avoid debt completely, because in this economy, it's not realistic to avoid it at all. However, but you need to make sure that you don't take unnecessary debt. You need to make sure that you manage the debts that you currently have, because now if it's not well managed, then you become over-indebted. And now over time, as it goes, that you are not able to sustain your living expenses, you're not able to sustain your debt obligations simply because there's just too much to pay.
And would you recommend or say that it's a good idea to go under debt review, particularly when you feel that you are too much you're drowning in debt?
Debt review is a remedial action that has been instituted by the National Credit Act. And this is to say that people that are struggling to pay their debts can apply for that remedial action. So if you feel that you are suffocating with the debts, you simply don't have enough to pay, or after paying there's not enough for your living expenses, then debt review becomes the option for you, a better option for you, because it safeguards your asset, lower your monthly installments, but at the same time you're still able to meet your debt obligations and as well as pay for your living expenses. So I would highly recommend debt review for people that are heavily over-indebted.
And for those, Paulvia, who are already over-indebted and already under debt review and can't afford repayments, what kind of relief is available to those people?
So one thing about debt review is that when you apply for it, most credit providers have what we call a credit life insurance. And now when we have entered debt review, that credit life insurance is not cancelled. It is still there included in that monthly installment. So if it happens that you are in a situation where you are not able to pay, make any payment or whatsoever towards your debt, this is where the credit life insurance can become effective, because now your debt counselor can write to the credit providers for some sort of relief. Now remember that the relief will only be for a certain number of for certain period, and then in that certain period it does give you relief over your expenses. You're not paying for them for that duration, whether it's 3 months or 6 months, whatever it is. Then it does provide you with relief then. But remember that when the relief is done, you now have to go back and meet that, go back to that paying that arrangement or that debt review installment.
Here's the problem, is that some people tend to actually sound the alarm bells only when it's too late. When is it time for a person to notice and actually pick up those red flags to say, hey, I'm potentially getting into debt?
What I would say is that the minute you miss payment, that's an indication that something is wrong. That's the first time where you should step up and say, like, I need help. And most of people come to us when there's already legal action on their assets. So this means that now it becomes a lot difficult for a debt counselor to assist you if there's already legal action on that account. But I would say that don't wait until you miss your first payment. You can already tell if you're going to make it through month end or not. This is the perfect time to come forward and say that I need help. What can we do before the situation gets worse?
And let's talk about the help that you actually do provide to consumers. Do you perhaps also, give them help and assistance in terms of avoiding being blacklisted and things like that?
Remember that when you apply for debt counseling, what we do is that we flag the person who has applied for debt counseling. So by the word flagging, it means that we're simply saying that for this certain time, you're not able to obtain credit because we want to make sure that you finish or you complete the current process, pay the current debts before you can be able to take on further credit. So it's not blacklisting per se, but we do flag you to say that you are restricted from obtaining credit until the debts have been paid up.
And how long does this process of debt rehabilitation take, or does it depend on maybe the value of the debt itself?
It depends on a number of factors, the value of the debt. It depends what type of debt is it. But what we always say is that what we make sure is that we cover this unsecured debt first. So this means all your debt repayments such as overdrafts, credit card and all that, they fall within an unsecured one, including a vehicle asset finance as well. So this means that now once those debts are done and they are paid up, then as a debt counselor, you can issue a clearance even if there's a bond involved, because now the bond, we do not put a duration on the time. So as long as the bond is all debts are paid up and there's a bond outstanding, you can exit the process where the debt counselor will issue a clearance certificate. So this makes it possible for you to obtain credit again if you wish to do so.
And it's a time for everyone to tighten their belts, looking at the status of play right now. And I would assume that there's also a need for one to sift through their needs and wants, right?
True.
How often should one be doing this?
What I normally tell people is that on a monthly basis, you still need to have a look at your budget. You still need to make sure that you have a realistic budget. Remember that realistic budget must fall within certain guidelines. For an example, we say that 50% of your income should be used for your living expenses, and then now 30% should be used for your debt obligation, or your wants rather. 50% should be for your needs and 30% for your wants, and 20% should be for your savings and your debt obligations. So it's really about prioritizing and checking down what is it that's important first. What do I have to pay? You need to get to a point where you understand what is necessary, what is a need, and what is a want, and you need to prioritize from that.
But are we a nation that is a saving nation, and are we a nation that is able to really rein in all those red flags when we find that we are over indebted, perhaps?
You know what I always say when it comes to saving is that it's not that people don't want to save. It's the fact that there isn't much to save with, or there isn't much to save on. I always advise people that before you can start to think of saving, get rid of the debt first, because when you get rid of the debt, it frees up a lot of income. So this makes it possible for you to take that money and to save it. But a lot of South Africans are not in a position to save because 70% or 80% of their salary goes towards their debt obligation. So now there isn't any money left to save. So I always say that get rid of the debt first, and then you can start looking at saving, because getting rid of the debt helps free up a lot of income.
I was actually just about to say that what do you save when there's absolutely nothing to save to begin with, when expenses sometimes are even more than what you're even getting on the monthly. So maybe just give us some quick handy tips in terms of saving and how do we go about it?
When it comes to saving, I always tell people that when it comes to saving, look at, start as low as you can. Start with a little amount, it goes a long way. Because if you start with saving a lot of money, chances are within the long run, 3 months, 4 down the line, you're not able to sustain that. So if you start with a small amount and you grow it on a monthly basis to say that this month I'm saving, for an example, 100 Rand. Let's see what I can do. Within 2 months, 3 months, you then increase it however you're able to do that. But if you start off to say that I'm going to start saving 10,000 on a monthly basis, then how realistic is that? We have to look at your income as well. So saving also needs to be realistic. It's about saving a small portion, and you gradually just commit yourself and you grow with that amount, and you make sure that you just keep adding to it, and eventually you will actually be in a lot better financial position, because discipline and commitment also goes a long way with regards to our finances as well. We need to be just as committed with our finances as we are with other things.
And say ideally, in a perfect world, I'm going to put you on the spot now, what would you call sufficient savings?
Sufficient savings, I would say that, remember, let's go back to the guidelines of the budget. 50% should be for your needs, 30% should be for your wants, and 20% should be for debt obligations and savings. So if already you're not within that guideline, already it becomes impossible for you to save. So you need to go back to the budget, go back to your list, go back to your expenses, and actually go through that and check, what can I do to make this a lot better? How can I actually save using the guidelines that we've been provided?